There are people you notice the second they walk into a room. And there are people you only notice the day they don't. In 3 years, Dante Ricci had never once noticed Cora Beckett walk into a room. She was simply always there. Before he arrived, after he left. A quiet woman in a soft gray cardigan and sensible shoes, who set his coffee at his elbow exactly the way he liked it, black and scalding, and made the most dangerous organization in the city run as smoothly and silently as an expensive watch. He noticed her the morning she wasn't there. He was 2 days from his wedding. The wedding was not, in any romantic sense of the word, a wedding. It was a merger. In 2 days Dante would stand at the front of a cathedral and marry Vittoria Ashford. And when he did, the Ricci shipping routes and the Ashford money would become one thing. And two families that had spent 30 years circling each other would finally stop. There would be 400 guests. There would be doves, because Vittoria had insisted on doves. And there would be, between the bride and the groom, precisely as much love as there was between two signatures on a contract. Dante had made his peace with it. Men in his position did not marry for love. They married for territory, for treaties, for the quiet that comes when your enemies are suddenly obligated to keep you alive. He understood the arrangement perfectly, and so did Vittoria, which was exactly why it was supposed to work. The one person who had made the whole machine of it run, the flowers, the guest lists, the security details, the 1,000 small decisions a man like Dante could not be bothered to make, was the woman who had not come in that morning. Cora Beckett did not miss mornings. In 3 years she had not been late by a single minute. She had come in with a fever that should have hospitalized her. She had come in the day after a water main flooded her building. She was, Dante had always assumed without ever once examining the assumption, simply a fixed point in the universe, as reliable as the sun tries, and about as easy to imagine thanking. By 10 o'clock her desk was still empty. By noon she had not answered a single call. And somewhere underneath the irritations Dante told himself he was feeling, a much colder and more unfamiliar thing had begun, very quietly, to wake up. Stay with me, because what Dante is about to find when he goes looking for this woman is going to break something open in him that he has kept locked for a very long time. If you're already worried about her, tap that like button and let her know she's not alone. Subscribe, and let's go find out what happened to Cora Beckett. Where does she live? Leo, his second, looked up from the security feed with the wary expression of a man who has just been asked a simple question and can feel a complicated day arrive. Boss, Cora, where does she live? Leo pulled it up, and then Leo frowned and read it twice and turned the screen so Dante could see it himself, because he clearly did not want to be the one to say it out loud. The address was on the far south side, past the rail yards, in a part of the city where the streetlights were shot out on purpose, and the only cars that came at night came to collect something, or someone. Dante stared at it. He paid Cora Beckett a salary that should have bought her a clean apartment downtown, with a doorman and covered parking and a view of the lake. He had signed the checks himself for 3 years, without ever once looking at where they went. He had assumed, the way rich men always assume about the people who serve them, that his money had insulated her, that she was fine, that she was like the coffee and the calendar and the quiet, simply handled. Bring the car around, Dante said. I'll send 2 men. Bring the car around, Leo. I'll go myself. The building leaned against the ones beside it like something too tired to stand on its own. There was no buzzer. The glass in the front door had been broken and patched with a warped square of plywood. Inside, the hallway was narrow and painted a sick institutional green that was peeling off the walls in long dry curls, and a single bulb flickered overhead, buzzing like something trapped. Dante climbed 4 flights in a coat that cost more than everyone on that floor made in a year, and with every step, that cold, unfamiliar thing in his chest climbed with him. He knocked on the door of apartment 4. Nothing. He knocked again and called her name, and pressed his ear to the cheap hollow wood, and heard very faintly the sound of someone breathing wrong. He did not knock a 3rd time. He put his shoulder into the door, and the flimsy lock gave on the 2nd try. And Dante Ricci stepped into the life his assistant had spent 3 years making certain he would never see. The apartment was almost entirely empty. Not the empty of a woman who had packed and run, The empty of a woman who had never had anything to begin with. There was no couch, there was no television. A single mattress on the floor in the corner, made up with military neatness. A folding chair. A card table, and on the card table, arranged with the same quiet precision she brought to his entire empire, was his work. Files, a laptop, 3 encrypted drives. The honest, careful order of a woman who spent her nights protecting a man who had never once wondered where she slept. And taped above the card table, the only decoration in the entire room, was a photograph. 2 women, younger, laughing on a beach that had faded to almost nothing. Cora and a girl with the same eyes and a brighter smile. Dante would learn the rest of it later, in pieces. The way you learn things that shame you. He would learn that the girl in the photograph was Cora's younger sister, and that the sister was sick. The kind of sick that comes with a name too long to say, and a bill too large to imagine. He would learn that for 2 years Cora had been sending nearly every dollar she earned to a hospital across the state, keeping her sister alive, one impossible payment at a time. That she had sold the car, then the furniture, then finally, the apartment downtown he had imagined her living in, and moved here, to the last cheap place in the city, because a woman cannot pour her whole life into saving someone she loves, and also afford to be seen doing it. She had made millions of dollars run through his hands, cleanly and invisibly, for 3 years. And she had done it while sleeping on a mattress on the floor, so that her sister could keep breathing. But Dante did not know any of that yet. Right then, in that freezing room, all he knew was the sound of someone breathing wrong. It was coming from behind the bathroom door. She was on the floor between the wall and the tub, and for one terrible second, Dante thought he was too late. Cora was pale in a way skin is not supposed to be. There was a wound high on her arm, wrapped in a strip of clean torn shirt gone dark at the center, and a fever coming off her in waves he could feel from the doorway. Her glasses were folded neatly on the edge of the sink, the way a careful person sets down the last thing they were still trying to take care of, and clutched against her chest, held there even in half-consciousness by fingers that would not let go, was one more encrypted drive. Not his files proof. Dante was across the room, and on his knees before he understood he had moved. Cora. His voice came out wrong, too loud, cracked down the middle. A voice he did not recognize as his own. Cora, look at me. Her eyes opened glassy and fever-bright, and it took her a moment to find his face. And when she did, the first thing his brilliant, dying, impossible assistant did was try to apologize for missing work. I'm sorry, she rasped. I couldn't come in. I know it's a bad week. Something in Dante Ricci's chest tore clean in half. You listen to me, he said, gathering her up off that freezing floor as gently as he had ever done anything in his life. Her weight nothing at all against a strength he had only ever used to hurt. You are done apologizing to me. Do you understand? You are done. She tried to tell him in the car between shivers, wrapped in his coat that swallowed her whole. She told it the way she did everything, precisely, without self-pity, laying the facts down one at a time like she was briefing him for a meeting. The wedding, she said, was not a merger. It was a killing. She had found it 3 days ago, buried in the Ashford financials she was never supposed to see. A second set of transfers. Money moving toward men whose only job was to make sure that after the vows, after the doves, after the treaties was signed and the 2 families were legally one, Dante Ricci would not survive the honeymoon. Vittoria would grieve beautifully. Her father would absorb everything. It was elegant. It was patient. It was 2 days away. Cora had gone to intercept the proof herself, because she did not know who in the organization she could trust. And because she did not say this part, but Dante heard it anyway, because she would rather bleed alone in a freezing bathroom than bring him a warning she could not prove and watch him choose the wedding over her word. I got it, she whispered, her head against his chest, the drive still clutched in her hand. It's all on here. Every name. I got it, Mr. Ricci. I couldn't get back in time to tell you before. Dante, he said quietly. She blinked up at him. My name, he said, is Dante. You've run my entire life for 3 years. I think you've earned it. And for the first time in the years he had known her, the calm, unshakable, endlessly competent Cora Beckett had absolutely nothing to say. Dante Ricci had been raised to believe that the strongest thing a man could do was feel nothing. He had built an empire on. He had married that belief, more truly than he would ever marry Vittoria Ashford, and it had kept him alive in a world that killed soft men first. But sitting in the back of that car, with the woman who had bled to keep him breathing folded against his chest, the woman he had walked past 10,000 times, and never once truly seen, Dante felt the whole careful architecture of that belief come quietly, permanently down. He took out his phone. He did not call his men. He did not call his enemies. He called the Ashford estate, and he waited. And when Vittoria's cool voice answered, expecting a question about doves, he said only 6 words. "The wedding is off, you lost." Then he hung up and he looked down at Cora, whose fever-bright eyes had finally, trustingly, slid shut against him, and he made her a promise she was too far gone to hear, the first honest vow of his entire adult life. Somewhere across the city, in a cathedral already filling with white flowers, 400 chairs were being set for a wedding that would now never happen. And somewhere much closer, a man who had never lost a war in his life was about to start one. For a woman in a gray cardigan he had never bothered to look at, until the morning she didn't come in. There are 2 kinds of men in Dante Ricci's world, the kind who take, and the kind who are taken from. For 36 years Dante had made very certain he was the first kind. He had never once, in his entire life, lost something he could not simply reach out and take back. The Ashfords were about to teach him exactly what that felt like. And then they were going to learn why you never, ever teach a man like Dante Ricci a lesson he did not ask for. For 4 days Cora Beckett slept in a warm bed for the first time in 2 years. Dante's estate was quiet and vast, and full of careful people who brought her broth and changed her bandages, and never once made her feel like a burden, because their employer had made it very clear, in a voice that left no room for interpretation, exactly what would happen to anyone who did. He came to see her every evening. He never stayed long. He would stand in the doorway with his sleeves rolled up, and his usual armor conspicuously absent, and he would ask her, with a stiffness that would have been almost funny if it weren't so unfamiliar to him, whether she needed anything. She never did. She had spent her whole life needing nothing out loud. But on the 4th evening, she said his name, his first name, the one she was still not used to, and told him the truth she had been holding for 2 years. "My sister," Cora said. "Emmy. She's in a hospital 300 miles from here, and the last payment I made bought her about 6 more weeks. After that," her voice, which never shook. "After that, I don't know what I do." Dante Ricci looked at the woman who had bled on a bathroom floor rather than let him see she was struggling, and he understood, finally and completely, the shape of everything she had been carrying alone. "You don't do anything," he said quietly, "because it's already handled. I made a call the first night. Emmy has the best doctors in the country as of yesterday morning, for as long as she needs them, and it is never going to be your problem again." Cora stared at him. And then, for the first time in the years he had known her, the calm, unbreakable, endlessly composed Cora Beckett put her face in her hands and wept. Not from sorrow, but from the almost unbearable relief of finally, after so long, being allowed to set something down. Dante did not know what to do with a crying woman, so he did the only thing that felt right. He crossed the room, and he sat on the edge of the bed, and he let her cry against his shoulder for as long as she needed to. And he did not say a single word. He just made himself, for once in his life, into a person someone could lean on. If you're feeling this, if you've ever carried something heavy alone for far too long, take a second and tap that like button and subscribe, because the people who did this to Cora are about to find out that they made a terrible, terrible mistake. Julian Ashford was not a stupid man. He understood the moment the wedding was called off that his patient and elegant plan to swallow the Ricci empire whole had failed. And he understood, from the specific coldness in Dante's voice on the phone, that Dante knew everything, which meant that somewhere, someone had found the proof. A smarter man might have run. Julian Ashford instead decided to take the one thing that would force Dante to the negotiating table. They took Cora on a Tuesday. She had insisted on going to Dante's office herself over his objections, because there were accounts that needed rebalancing before the Ashford exposure went public. And because Cora Beckett did not know how to heal quietly, while other people did her job badly. She was in the parking garage, 2 of Dante's men 20 feet away when the van came. It was fast, and it was professional. By the time Dante's men reached the spot, There was nothing left but her glasses, cracked on the concrete, and a single sheet of paper weighted down by a stone. In exchange, the note read, "The drive for the woman." You know where when they brought Dante the note and the broken glasses, the temperature in the entire building dropped. He did not shout. He did not break anything. He simply picked up the cracked glasses, folded them closed with a care that frightened every man in the room, and slid them into his breast pocket, over his heart. "Get the cars," Dante Ricci said, "all of them." Here is what Julian Ashford did not understand about the woman he had taken. He thought he had taken a secretary, a soft, frightened, unimportant thing to be used as leverage and discarded. He put her in a chair in the back of a cold warehouse, and he did not bother to guard her closely, because what was there to guard? She was an accountant. She wept on bathroom floors. She was nothing. Cora Beckett sat very still in that chair, and she did what she had always done, in every room she had ever been overlooked in. She watched. She counted. She listened. She counted the men. 6. She listened to the ones who thought she couldn't understand their coded shorthand, and learned that the shipment they were nervous about was arriving at the north gate at midnight. She noted which of them checked his phone too often, and was therefore afraid, and was therefore the weak seen. And when Julian Ashford himself came to gloat, to tell her that her employer would trade an empire's worth of secrets for one worthless woman's, Cora looked up at him with her calm, tired, unimpressed eyes and said, "The truest thing anyone's said that whole night." "You've made a mistake," she told him. "Not because he'll come for me. Because of what he'll do when he does. You had a chance to simply disappear, Mr. Ashford. You spent it on me." She almost smiled. That was a very poor use of leverage. Julian Ashford did not like being lectured at by his hostage. But some part of him, some old animal part that had kept him alive in a dangerous world for a long time, heard the certainty in her voice, and for the first time all night, felt afraid. Dante came at midnight. He did not come to negotiate. Men like Dante Ricci do not trade away their enemies' knowledge of exactly how much they can lose. He came the way the truly dangerous always come, quietly, completely, and one step ahead. His people had the drive's contents already copied, and already moving toward every rival family, and every honest prosecutor who would want them. There was nothing left to trade. There was only the woman. The north gate opened at midnight for a shipment that never arrived, because Cora had told him it would, in the only way she could. She had known, with the strange faith of a woman who had watched him work for 3 years, that Dante's would find out where she was, and that when he did, he would need to know the shape of the room. He came through the north gate. What happened in that warehouse did not take long, and it was not, in the end, much of a fight. Julian Ashford's men were paid to be there. Dante's men were there because their boss's whole world was sitting in a chair in the middle of that room, and there is no wage on earth that competes with that. When it was over, Julian Ashford was on his knees on the cold concrete, and Dante Ricci walked past him without so much as a glance, because the only thing in that entire warehouse Dante had come for was already rising from a chair, a little unsteady, and looking at him with an expression he would spend the rest of his life trying to deserve. "You're late," Cora said. Her voice only shook a little. "You're barefoot," Dante answered, because they had taken her shoes, and because he did not trust himself to say anything true yet. And then the most feared man in the city crossed a warehouse floor, and he took off his own coat, and he wrapped it around her shoulders, and he did not care who was watching. He dealt with Julian Ashford the way he dealt with everything now. Completely. But without the mess he once would have made. He did not need to. By morning the proof Cora had bled for was in the hands of everyone who mattered. The Ashford accounts, the offshore transfers, the elegant patient plan to murder a man at his own wedding, all of it, laid bare. The other families, who had no love for a house that would break the old rule and betray a marriage alliance, turned their backs on the Ashfords overnight. Julian's own people, sensing the shift, melted away toward safer employers. Julian Ashford was not killed. He left instead to watch over the following weeks, as everything he had spent 40 years building came apart in his hands, stripped and scattered and given to the wind. Vittoria, who had been so certain she would grieve beautifully at a funeral of her own design, married no one, inherited nothing, and disappeared into the kind of quiet obscurity that is, for people like the Ashfords, A fate far worse than any bullet. It was the slower justice, the kind that lasts. And Dante Ricci found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he no longer had any appetite for the other kind. 6 weeks later, Cora Beckett stood at a window in Dante's estate, watching a car come up the long drive. Her sister was in it. Emmy was thin and pale and moving slowly and alive, gloriously, impossibly alive, waving out the car window like a woman who had been told she had 6 weeks and had instead been handed the rest of her life. Cora had not seen her walk in over a year. She pressed her hand flat against the cold glass and made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob, and did not notice Dante come to stand beside her until his shoulder brushed hers. "You did that," Cora said, not looking away from the window, her voice thick. "You know that you did that." "You did it," Dante corrected quietly. "For 2 years alone at a cost I still can't fully make myself think about. All I did was write a check." He was quiet for a moment. "You spent everything you had keeping her breathing. And you never once let me see you sink. Do you have any idea how rare it is, Cora, to meet a person who is that strong and that kind at the same time? In my world you almost never get both." She finally turned to look at him. "Then why me?" she asked. It was the same question she had been too proud to ask on the night he found her. "You could have anyone, Dante. Someone easy, someone who fits. Why the woman who was sleeping on a floor?" Dante Ricci had spent his entire life being feared, obeyed, and lied to. He had almost never been asked a question that mattered by someone who actually wanted the true answer. So he gave her one. "Because for 3 years," he said, "you were the only person in my entire life who took care of me, without ever once wanting something from me in return. I was too blind and too spoiled to see it. And the morning you didn't come in, I felt the floor go out from under an empire I built, to make sure I would never need anyone." He reached up and very gently he tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't want easy, Cora. I've had easy. I want the woman who bled on a bathroom floor to protect me and then apologized for missing work." A faint, rare, real smile. "I want the person who's actually holding everything up." Cora looked at the dangerous man in front of her, who had burned an empire to the ground to bring her sister home, and she felt the last of the walls she had built around herself. Walls built by a man who left. Walls built by a world that overlooked her. Quietly come down. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, okay," she said again, steadier now, and a little wet, and completely certain. "But I'm keeping my own office. And you are still not allowed to reorganize the filing system. You are catastrophic at it." Dante Ricci, the most feared man in the city, laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. The kind almost no one living had ever heard. And down on the drive, a thin, pale, laughing woman climbed out of a car into the sunlight, alive, while her sister watched from a window, held for the first time in years by someone who had finally seen her. There is a thing the powerful never seem to learn. No matter how many times the world tries to teach it, they surround themselves with the loud and the polished and the beautiful. And they walk straight past the quiet person in the gray cardigan, who is holding the entire ceiling up over their head. They mistake being served for being loved. They confuse the people who want something from them with the people who would bleed for them. And they only ever learn the difference on the morning the quiet one doesn't come in. Cora Beckett had spent her whole life being overlooked and underestimated and unseen. She had never needed anyone to save her. She had been saving everyone around her, quietly, at enormous cost, for as long as she could remember. But everyone, even the strongest among us, even the ones who carry the whole weight alone, deserves one person who finally looks up from their own life and sees them and decides that they are worth burning the world down for. Cora found hers in the last place she ever expected. And the most feared man in the city, who had built a fortress to make sure he would never need anyone, discovered that the only thing worth having all that power for, in the end, was someone worth using it to protect. If Cora and Dante's story moved you, leave a like and share it with someone who has spent too long being the strong one nobody takes care of. Tell them their turn is coming. Subscribe, because next week, another quiet soul the world overlooked is about to be seen for exactly who they are. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.